Hi everyone, and welcome to the Quilter's Toolbox series here on the Cora's Quilts YouTube channel. If we haven't met before, my name is Shelly Kavana and I'm here to help you make stunning quilts simply. Today's Quilter's Toolbox video is all about how to work with paper quilting templates. I designed this series to give you a quick and easy reference guide to some of my favorite quilting techniques that I've used throughout my quilt books and patterns. You can find a link to the full series in the description box below. Or if you're looking for help with a specific project, head over to corasquilts.com/patterns and click on the pattern of your choice for a list of all the available tutorials associated with that project. Today's Quilter's Toolbox video is all about how to work with paper quilting templates. Specifically, the center and side triangles you'll need to make a square and triangle block. You may have heard this already, but I'm a bit of a minimalist when it comes to specialty notions and rulers. And while I usually prefer to design quilts with shapes I can make using only squares and rectangles, I do love the pizzazz that these triangle and square blocks add to our quilt designs. So before we chat about my tips for cutting fabric using paper templates, I feel like I need to mention that I think the easiest and most straightforward way to cut these triangles for these triangle and square units is honestly using a specialty ruler set. I have the Tri-Rex ruler pair in my own studio, and there are several similar rulers out on the market that will work. So if you are thinking that you might be interested in making quilts with these triangle and square blocks or half rectangle triangle blocks, I do highly recommend investing in one of these acrylic rulers. They just make the work of cutting so much easier, and if you want to see this particular ruler pair in action, I've left the links to our Tri-Rex ruler tutorial in the video description box below. I understand though that these rulers might not be available to you, or that you might want to explore seeing if working with paper templates works well enough that you won't need the ruler. So in today's video, I'm sharing my 5 tips for working with paper triangle templates. My first tip for working with printed quilt templates for any kind of project actually begins with your computer. If you're working with a digital pattern, you need to make sure to print your templates at 100% scale. I'm working with my MacBook Pro using Adobe's Acrobat program. I've opened my pattern file, and when I go to print, in the print dialog box, you can see that for my printer, my page size and handling is set to fit to print, which is not what I want. What I really want to select is print at actual size or 100% custom scale. And after you print, measure the test square included on your pattern page to make sure that it has indeed printed at the correct scale. There are plenty of video tutorials out there to help with print settings and printing from PDF files, so if you're experiencing difficulties, search for a tutorial using your specific operating system and your preferred printer. If you're working from a digital pattern, print 2 or 3 copies of each template page so that you always have a fresh copy at hand. If you're working from a kit that includes a printed copy of the pattern, be sure to photocopy each pattern template page, again at 100% scale, and work only from your copies. This way, if you happen to lose or damage a template, you always have an uncut version of the original page at hand. Before you start cutting your fabric, it's a good idea to take a look and kind of understand your template. Most quilting templates include 2 lines. A solid inner line, which shows the finished unit. This solid line is where your seam will be. And then you also have an outer line, which in our patterns is a dashed line. And this is your cutting line where your 1/4 inch seam allowance is. This is the line that you want to cut along when you cut out your templates. Don't worry about cutting on the inside or the outside or right along this dashed line, because you'll see in a minute this isn't super important. When it's time to start cutting your fabric, you're going to want to use your template and a quilting ruler. Yes, even though we have the template, we're still going to use a quilt ruler with a 1/4 inch seam marked on it. Both the center and side triangle templates were formulated to cut triangles from a strip set. So you'll first cut the strip of fabric as directed by your pattern. I like to save a little bit of time by cutting from a strip that is folded in half, just like the fabric came off the bolt. So really, as I'm cutting, I'll be cutting 2 triangles at once. For the center triangles, you want to line up the top and bottom edges of your template with the top and bottom edges of your strip. Then you'll line up the 1/4 inch edge of your ruler with the solid inner seam line of your template and carefully cut your first edge. With this first cut, you might notice that you've shaved off a tiny bit of your paper template. And this is really the danger of using paper templates because you can easily lose your accurate seam allowances. But if you're cutting using a ruler and a template and using that ruler to measure a 1/4 inch away from your seam line, then you can trust that even if you shave a tiny bit of your template off, that your triangle is really accurate still. For this first center triangle, you'll cut from the strip. You'll have to repeat a second cut on the opposite side to finish cutting the triangle. After that, you will just pivot the template, line up your top and bottom edges, and keep cutting and pivoting until you've cut the number of triangles you need for your project. I do think it's really important after every few triangles you cut to check and possibly retrim that first edge just to make sure that your fabric hasn't shifted around a little bit or that your angle hasn't gotten slightly off. Cutting the side triangle templates isn't much different than cutting the center triangles, but be sure to check with your pattern for how these side triangles are used. If you're working with half rectangle triangle units, you need to pay careful attention to your pattern to see if you need left or right leaning triangles. If you're working with a triangle in square block, you'll need an equal number of left and right facing triangles. But if you're cutting directly from a strip that's folded in half with the wrong sides together, then you're automatically going to cut 2 mirrored triangles with every single pass. So again, all you need to do is line up the top and bottom edges of your template with the top and bottom edges of your strip and cut using that ruler's 1/4 inch mark to line up with the template's stitching line. When you're cutting out your side triangle templates, you probably will notice that in our patterns, we call your attention to this extra little notch that needs to be cut from the side triangles. And this notch might seem insignificant, and if you have more than a few of these triangles to cut, it's going to seem annoying to have to cut this extra notch at every single triangle. And I know that you're going to be tempted to skip this step, but don't. This notch is what's going to help us line up this side triangle with our center triangles and to get them lined up perfectly so that you don't throw off your seam allowances or the top and bottom edges of your block. So absolutely take the time to trim off this last little bit before you go to cut your next triangle from the strip. And I think that in needing to cut this notch, this is where the acrylic rulers are really worth their weight in gold. Because with the paper template, you only have a point, not a straight line to line your quilting ruler up. So you need to be very, very careful. Because if you trim off even a hair from your template too far, you're going to have a hard time lining up your triangle points correctly when it comes time to piece your blocks later down the line. It's not impossible, but it is a little challenging, and this aspect alone is what makes it worth using an acrylic ruler in place of these paper templates. I hope today's video gave you some pointers for working with paper templates when constructing triangle and square units or half rectangle triangle units. For tips and tricks on how to assemble the pieces into the finished block, check out our Quilter's Toolbox tutorial for making triangle and square blocks, linked in the video description box below. Thank you so much for watching today's Quilter's Toolbox video. Remember, you can share your quilt along or quilt project photos over on Instagram using hashtag Cora's Quilts. And be sure to tag us at Cora's Quilts so that we can see your photos too. Don't forget to stop by our website and sign up for our emailed newsletter to hear all about the happenings in our studio. We'll send you 2 free quilt patterns to say thanks for signing up. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Happy sewing, and we'll see you soon with another Quilter's Toolbox video.